I'm Janeane. This is KUCI 88.9 FM in Irvine, and this is Get the Funk Out. I don't know if my guest knew that. Welcome, Jeffrey.
Yeah,
Binney.
thanks so much. No, I did know that. I got a good
Okay.
chuckle the first time I saw that.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, I heard about you and your project, and your whole background, and I thought, oh, I'm sure he's been in a funk or two.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, understatement.
Right?
Various funks. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me, you have so much to talk about your film and everything, but how'd you get into comedy?
Yeah, well, I started in theater. I lived in New York and I worked in theater and found some success, but I started to get a little burnt out. I spent there was a show that was running on Broadway, and I did the Chicago company of the show, and then I moved to the tour. And all told, I had been with the show for almost 2 years. Amazing show, the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee. I
Oh
don't know
yeah.
if you got a chance to see it or not. Yeah, it's an incredible show. So if you're going to do the same show 8 times a week for 2 years, it's a
Wow.
great option. But yeah, I was just a little burnt out. So I did the improv program at Upright Citizens Brigade Theater in New York, which is an improv school and theater in New York. And I was okay at improv, but I wasn't amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of led me to stand up. And the first time I started doing stand up, I mean, it's a struggle for any comedian.
Right.
You're not half decent until you've been doing it for, maybe 10 years. So it was a struggle. It's a rough industry. Unlike the theater or film and television world, there is no union for comedians unless they're doing film and television work. And so it's a little Wild Westy. I call it the
Yes.
Wild West of the entertainment industry. There aren't a lot of rules. But I fell in love with it immediately. I had never had so much control over the creative process. And it was, because of that, it was more terrifying, but also more rewarding. When I would have a bad set, it was worse than any bad theater performance I had ever had, because I wrote everything. I was in charge of everything. I wrote everything. I performed everything. I chose my outfit. I was in charge.
The whole shebang. Yeah.
Exactly. But conversely, when it went really well, it was the opposite. I was like, oh my gosh, like that was outstanding, and I can take credit for almost all of it. And that was a cool feeling, especially coming from the theater world, where you're always reciting other people's dialogue. So that's how I got to stand up. I fell in love with it, and then my film, as I mentioned, it takes years and years of slogging through the comedy industry to find any traction, and I just wasn't really patient enough. I wasn't loving sitting around waiting for somebody to ask me to write my first hour show, and so I was just kind of like, well, why can't I do it myself? Is there a way? Can I just do it myself? I mean, I know it's not going to be a high budget a Netflix comedy special, but maybe I can do my own thing for my own audience. And so that's what I did.
Amazing. How long did it take you to do this?
Oh my gosh. 5 years all told. I mean, partly because of the nature of the subject matter. I mean, for those listening, the film Once Is Enough, I lost my mother to obesity caused heart disease, and I was 340 pounds, 6'2" ginger lumberjack, and I was pretty desperate to not find myself in the same place as her. So I decided to run a 100-mile ultra marathon, take a film crew with me to document the whole experience, and then write an hour stand-up show about the whole debacle. And then the film is a juxtaposition of those two things, half documentary, half stand-up comedy.
Were you ever, excuse me, when you decided to run all these miles and you weigh as much as you weighed, were you ever like, wait a minute, what was I thinking?
Oh, every day.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have a habit of biting off more than I can chew. So I never long-term got discouraged, but yeah, absolutely. It's hard for anyone to run an ultra marathon, let alone someone who's, carrying an extra 130 pounds. And yeah, it was a major struggle. I was never athletic as a kid. I was forced to play sports, but I didn't enjoy them. I wasn't good at them.
Especially when you're forced.
Right. Well, yeah, it takes the fun out of it immediately.
You have to play basketball, and you have to play football, and you have to be amazing.
Yeah, exactly. but my mom's last 3 months in the hospital, she was in the ICU for 3 months, not to mention a regular hospital stay before that. So it was a pretty long, drawn out process. I was lucky that I was able to come back to Missouri, where I'm from, and be with her during that time. But I spent a lot of time in a hospital waiting room,
Oh,
and I discovered a trail running magazine. They had a number of what I would have considered fairly obscure magazine subscriptions, but I started reading that magazine and kind of immediately was interested and started doing all the Google searches on the topic. I kind of dove headfirst into it, and then there was a particularly bad day during our ICU stint, and I was a little maybe desperate, maybe not totally right in my mind, but I went straight to a running store, bought a pair of running shoes, and I went and found a state park and went for my first trail run and was immediately hooked. I felt like a kid in a candy shop. I felt like I was playing. I was jumping over logs.
yeah.
Nobody was watching me. Nobody was timing me. It was
No
just
one's judging you.
nobody's judging me.
Yeah.
Nobody cares if my fat's jiggling. And that was totally new for me, to not be in a PE class or not be in an organized sport, to be doing it for the fun of it and not to win or to be the best was suddenly a really new experience for me. And I realized, like, I guess in a sense, I am an athlete, just not
Yeah.
what I thought an athlete was.
You had
Maybe
to find your own form of exercise that you liked.
absolutely. That is exactly it.
Yeah, I get it. So that's amazing, because here you are, stressed out, worried about your mom, and you decide, I'm going to take up running. And then at what point would you decide, I'm going to make this a film?
Well, it was about a year and a half process. I started running. Like I said, I loved it. I think because it was so therapeutic. I enjoy mindfulness and meditate when I can, but when you're out in the woods running for hours on end, you really can't help but let your mind kind of shut down a bit.
Yes.
And so, so therapeutic for that reason, as I just kept doing it. I probably, maybe slightly unhealthily, addicted to it, and it kept compounding. And about 9 months later, I decided to try my first 50 miler. I had this idea of
Whoa.
this film project. I wasn't doing great emotionally. I was, honestly, I was depressed. I was grieving. I wasn't really doing anything. And one of my friends, mentioned, like, hey, you keep saying all you want to do is disappear into the woods to run,
Mhm.
and you want to be doing more stand up and write your first show. Like, can we, like, is there a combination? Is there a
Yes.
marriage between those two things? And I mean, like a lightning flash, I had this idea, but I was hesitant. I mean, I didn't want to be super unrealistic. So I decided to run a 50 miler first. And I did the North Face Endurance Challenge, which is just north of San Francisco in the
Oof.
Marin Headlands. And that was kind of my test for me. I said, hey, like, if I can survive this,
Mhm.
then maybe it's not totally ludicrous to think about 100 miler. And I can't say that the 50 miler went well, but I did finish it and I did enjoy it. So it was all thumbs up. And that's when I decided to pull the trigger.
I mean, you didn't even go for a marathon. You went for almost double.
Yeah, well, while my mom was in the hospital, I had signed up for a 20 miler in Missouri, and it ended up being a few weeks after she passed away, and I almost didn't do it, but she was so excited for my running. The last month, she was aware that I was doing this crazy thing,
Mhm.
and always super supportive, which is probably how I ended up the way I am. Quite frankly, I grew up on a pig farm in Missouri, and my mom was very much a responsible yes mom. I remember specifically one time I came inside and I said, hey mom, I'm super bored, but there's a bunch of hay bales and some scrap metal in the barn. I bet I could build a roller coaster. And any reasonable parent would be like, I don't know about that, but that wasn't her style. She said, okay, yeah, probably, be safe, but go for it.
So I just realized something.
What?
That was your first exposure to improv. Yes, and
Yeah, you're right. 100%.
Right?
100%.
Yes, and just be careful.
She was a definite yes-ander.
That's so funny.
Yeah, it's wild. I never thought of it that way.
You didn't, but sometimes when you tell your story, there's someone else can get that perspective you were too close to see.
Oh, 100%. It's always, I mean, gosh, I mean, that applies to so many aspects of life, but especially as a creative of any variety.
Right.
I have so many friends who, maybe we're going off on a tangent here, but I have so many friends who hate to read reviews or really kind of hate to get feedback. And I get part of that. You don't want that to color your performance. You don't want to perform for other people. You want to perform for performance's sake. So I certainly understand that. But I think I learned the most from getting honest feedback from people. Actually, when we were testing the film before we finalized post-production, we did some online test screenings, and I had all the condition was anyone who followed me on Instagram or Facebook or who I knew personally could participate for free as long as they brought at least one person who did not know me, who didn't know me, knew nothing about me, because that's when you get the best feedback, right?
Definitely.
People who
Yes.
no preconceived notions.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, my friends and family love me. They're going to like me no matter what I do. They're going to love everything I produce. But what do other people think? I love reading YouTube comments. I love that kind of stuff that I think most creatives kind of
I know
retract
shy away from. I know.
Yeah, and I see both sides of it. I think maybe there's a happy medium, but also at the end of the day, I need to sell what I produce in order to be able to produce more. So I don't know. Hopefully,
well, that's good. You take it as constructive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Even when it's negative, it can be constructive.
That's good. That's a healthy outlook. What would you like listeners to know about your film without giving too much away?
Yeah, well, I think I gave the general rundown earlier, but I think the takeaway is hopefully it doesn't have to be a 100 miler. It doesn't have to be anything athletic, but if there's something you've been wanting to do forever that you keep putting off, there's a better time for it. There's not. Like right now is almost probably definitely the right time. We have, it's such a cliche, but we truly have no idea how long we're going to be here. And if anything, after watching the film, I hope people are just inspired and motivated to just do the thing.
Right. No, it's excellent advice because, we all need a lift right now. And so here's a question for you while we're focusing on that. For people that are in a funk, professionally, personally, what advice would you give them?
So I think the biggest life lesson that I have taken away from my whole experience of making this film, it came from the running component. The first thing I learned about ultra running is there's a time when you're running, when anyone's going for a run, there's a time when things start to hurt. It's not fun anymore. It's uncomfortable, and any reasonable person would quit. that's
Especially
the time
when
you
you have 48 miles left.
Yeah, exactly. But there's always that point when you should quit, or you think you should quit, or any normal, reasonable person would quit. But it turns out if you don't quit, if you just choose to keep pushing through, it turns out that twitch in your ankle probably goes away. It turns out that your bad mood, once you have some sugar, lifts, and it turns out you can do so much more than you thought you could do. And there's virtually no part of life that I can't apply that lesson to. There's definitely a different awareness in me now when I reach in any aspect or project of my life. There's definitely a different approach when I reach that point that any reasonable person would quit.
Right. Well, we tend to limit ourselves. We get stuck in this safe place that's actually not safe, but we think it is, and we don't want to push and grow and challenge.
Yeah, it's hard. It hurts sometimes, right? I mean, but in the end, you come out oftentimes, you come out stronger, better, smarter.
You bet.
Yeah.
Is there anything you learned about yourself while making this film?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I was, as a kid, I grew up in rural Missouri on a pig farm, like I said, and I made no attempt to fit in terms of hunting. I'm a vegan now. And even as a kid, like I was totally uninterested in hunting, which is huge in rural Missouri. I wasn't into sports. I definitely wouldn't have considered myself athletic. If you had said, oh, are you super strong, super weak? I probably said, I'm probably a little weaker than average.
Mm-hmm.
Now I couldn't disagree more. I am a badass. I can't say that. I am so much tougher than I realized I was. And
That's great.
yeah, I mean, it was quite a shock. I didn't realize I was tough. Turns
You
out I
didn't
am.
know you'd find that out while making the film.
No, of course not. I mean, that's the best reason to embark on any project like this, though, right? You're inevitably going to learn things about yourself that you weren't expecting.
Yes. Do you still like to run?
Yeah. I just went for a run in the rain this morning. It's my favorite. I live
love
in
that.
Salt Lake City now, which is just paradise for a trail runner.
That's great.
20 minutes away, I can be in the middle of
That's
nowhere in the
amazing.
mountains.
And I
Yeah.
love how you're vegan.
Yeah, I mean, I call myself a naughty vegan. There's a section about it in the film. I'm pretty reasonable. I call it reasonable, but I would say I'm like 90% vegan.
That's good.
Yeah, it's better than 0% vegan,
It
right?
is. And I feel like it gives you more energy. If you try it, you'll see that you can get a lot of energy and great food.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, it's not the primary reason I do it, but I think, there are a lot of misconceptions about veganism. There's a lot of people who maybe don't look at vegans favorably or see them as militant in certain ways. And I think if there's anything that drives my choice and how I eat is thinking of how other people are seeing it. I don't want to go to a restaurant with a number of friends who are non-vegans and leave them with an impression that it's difficult or inconvenient, or that I'm going to inconvenience the restaurant. I think making it as accessible as possible is really valuable in helping people make more sustainable food choices. But
Definitely.
yeah.
Could you give the name of your film?
Yeah, Once Is Enough. OnceIsEnoughFilm.com is the website, and it's on all the places: Amazon, iTunes, Google Play, Tubi. It should be all over the place. So
Excellent.
It should be relatively easy to find.
Congratulations.
Oh, thanks so much, and thanks for having me on today. So good to chat and meet you.
My pleasure. Such a huge accomplishment.
Oh, thank you.